August is off to a steamy start, but it's cool inside, and we welcome you into another edition of Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel again this week. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church. All eyes were on Taiwan this week as U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi became the highest-ranking American official in 25 years to visit that island. Taiwan is self-ruled, but China lays claim to it and quickly fired missiles near Taiwan in retaliation. Taiwan was forced to cancel airline flights, and there is worry there will be an interruption in the flow of processor chips needed by global telecom and auto industries. Taiwan is the second largest, highest producer of those chips. Back in the United States, 26 Republican lawmakers issued a statement of rare bipartisan support for the Democratic Speaker Pelosi. So turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, where do you weigh in on this trip to Taiwan?
I don't understand what a two-China policy is or a one-China policy. Since the Nixon administration, we've accepted the People's Republic of China as China. And I don't see how and where Taiwan fits into that picture. It vexes me. The idea of congressional trips to China, to Taiwan, no big deal. It's been going on for forever. But I just don't see how it goes with our one China policy now.
Nancy Pelosi going, as Stan, I think you were saying that Congress members have gone there routinely to Taiwan to visit. I think China should not see this as a provocation, but they do, and I think they do because they want to. And I certainly agree with all of the congressional members. I am glad this was bipartisan, as our foreign policy should be in many ways, because this was not meant to be a provocation to China, but it is a lens that we see Taiwan as a free state, because that's what the people want. They elected a person. And governmental leaders, they have free elections, and so we recognize that as the rights of people for self-determination. And so it was not meant to be a provocation to China, but it sounds to me as if China wants it as an excuse to do military operations near there, and anyway, and some saber rattling, I think. So that's my take on it.
You know, if you may recall that one of the first faux pas of the Trump administration was right after he was elected, he made a phone call or received a phone call from Taiwan. And he erroneously referred to the person as the president of Taiwan, not knowing that there was this one China policy at the time, as I recall. So Taiwan has been a source of misunderstanding, I'll phrase it that way, for some time with respect to the USA. As far as the bipartisan, rallying around Nancy Pelosi's trip, which is extremely rare, but anytime there's a bipartisan anything, I always put an asterisk by it. The championing of the gesture of promoting democracy around the world, of course, is almost laughable anytime you see it coming from the Republican side, given the past history of recent election events and the like. So for them to align themselves in a bipartisan way, celebrating democracy in the name of celebrating democracy is almost laughable. Taiwan and China, of course, has a long history. The history is, ironically enough, is similar to the history of Russia and Ukraine. You may recall that the Ukraine was a part of the USSR at one point, and Russia now claims that it's reclaiming land that was a part of theirs all along, which is similar to the argument that China is making now. So Taiwan and China, of course, are the same culturally. As far as China is concerned, Taiwan is a part of the Republic of China. So you have that kind of a contradiction going on there with respect to Taiwan and China, and also it being similar to Russia and the Ukraine. So as far as Nancy going now of all times, I mean, it may seem a little odd that she would go now of all times, but it's good that she has made a trip to Taiwan. I was fortunate enough to go to China about 3 or 4 years ago, and I got a chance to immerse myself in Chinese culture, having gone also not only to Beijing, but also to Hong Kong, which had a kind of a strange, Hong Kong and China is kind of like Taiwan and China, kind of. It was in it, but not of it. So it has a similar relationship to the mainland China that Hong Kong had at one time. So it makes for some good theater. Apparently, China is using this as an occasion, like John mentioned. It is using this as an occasion to do a little saber rattling and making a point, but they're not going to apparently do anything because they haven't done anything with respect to Taiwan's attitude and position operating as an independent, sovereign government. And they have not done anything to stop that militarily or economically. So it remains to be seen how this is all going to play out in the world economy. They are important to the world economy, clearly, with production of certain electronic devices that are vital to the world economy. So it remains to be seen how this is going to play out.
Well, I'm proud of her that she's gone. I think this is a valiant effort on her part to support democracy. And I wish that earlier at some point we had done the same with Ukraine, that we had thought enough in advance to at least be able to arm them so they could defend themselves, and still waiting until we were sort of after the effect. But I'm really proud of her that she's gone. And I think that you just can't give way to the bullies of the world, whether it be Russia or whether it be China.
Let's draw a dichotomy for just a second. What we're doing now, both with regard to Ukraine and with Nancy Pelosi's trip to China, these are two, I think, courageous and moral acts, and acts that if something would have happened like that in 1938 or 1939, perhaps there wouldn't have been a Second World War. And what we're doing is we're saying, this is the border, you may not cross it, and we know.
Mm-hmm.
So are you concerned, John used the term saber rattling, other people have said, are you poking the bear? Are you concerned about a U.S. involvement in conflict? Are you worried about that moving forward?
Always.
Yeah, that's always a concern. But you mentioned a word there, Rabbi Miles, moral. See, sad to say, America has lost its moral high ground with respect to being a light on the hill championing democracy. You know, what we've been dealing with in the last 2 years and months regarding January 6th almost makes America's position and being a trumpet for democracy almost, again, laughable. Our form of government is not a pure democracy. It's more of a duplicity than anything else, because democracy at its root means one man, one vote. So the fact that we have so-called monkeyed around with the voting process and undermine the integrity of the 2020 election puts our position as being a moral authority with respect to democracy clearly in jeopardy. So the high ground we once enjoyed in terms of being a champion of democracy, I think has been sorely undermined and diminished based on the behavior here in America. I mean, I appreciate the gesture of Nancy Pelosi going there. I guess, but our position as being a moral leader with democracy has clearly been diminished in the eyes of the world.
But as you talk about that, what I think you're mentioning, and I partially agree, that is the building up of a moral reputation. And that has an effect on diplomacy and the place of the United States in world affairs in terms of its diplomatic status and that. But that doesn't mean that if we have a reputation that we cannot make that we cannot make good choices, because we can. And in fact, I think we ought to be encouraged to make good choices for democracy in the world, even as there are times when, as a people, we may have failed. And so like January 6th would be a sign to people that certainly is a failure in the democratic process. But I also think that that impels us to make good diplomatic and good world choices for the sake of democracy in our world, supporting other democratic governments, supporting the people the right to vote and for them to have a voice in their government. It's having a concern and taking action on human rights in our world. Those kinds of things, I think, are important for us to do. And as we make those choices, hopefully they build up our standing in the world in terms of our reputation and what we are trying to say.
Well, I think it should really, I agree with you. I think it should challenge us to do more. It's always the right time to do right, as Dr. King said. But it made me think about Woodrow Wilson and his role in World War I. Mm-hmm. He got involved with the World War I, campaign to promote democracy around the world. And he achieved it to a great degree. However, nothing was more contradictory and duplicitous than the stand of Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, he championed democracy around the world. And in effect, he did have a great effect on doing just that. But what he achieved back home was horrible with respect to race relations. He removed all Black workers working in the federal government. He was extremely racist. He championed the Birth of a Nation, the most horrendous racist movie ever in the White House. He championed some of the most racist ideals here in America. He didn't even recognize the Black soldiers who fought in World War I for that democracy. When they came back home, they had everything but democracy. So he clearly was an example of someone who did have great effect in the world with respect to democracy, but it was a huge contradiction to how he actually practiced it at home in America.
You know, we have a lot to overcome for the past several years. And if we don't start making statements that show our solidarity as who we are as a nation, then I think we're in trouble. I think it's time that we stood up and said what we believe. There's so many out there that still believe that 1/6 was insignificant. And we've got to start somewhere to rebuild. And I think that this is a way to start rebuilding who we are and what we believe in. And I don't know how that's going to turn out. I mean, I've watched the hearings, I've seen what's going on, but I do know so many people feel so passionate about the opposite direction. And again, I think we just have to start somewhere. And I think that's for all of Biden's perhaps flaws that other people see. I think that's what he's trying to do.
I agree.
All right, very good. We're off about halfway through our program this week, Moral Side of the News. So we'll switch to our second topic. We've all seen the horrific video and pictures of flooding in eastern Kentucky. As of this weekend, 37 lives have been lost in what Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear calls a 1,000-year flood. This atop December's western Kentucky tornadoes that killed 80 in December. Much will be needed to help those left homeless. So panelists, we hope this tragedy brings out the best in people who are capable of responding, correct?
It seems like we are, but Andy Beshear has been hammered relentlessly since he became governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And he asked what is causing this. Sadly, I think that's a rhetorical question. A lot of this is caused by climate change and specifically with regard to the flooding, the ecology of this particular area of the Commonwealth, because you have people living down below in the hollers, and when there's torrential rain, it literally makes a river, and we have to help those people as they put their lives back together again, put their lives back together in a fashion that they're not going to, as they rebuild, put themselves in harm's way once again.
I agree, Rabbi. It is this is a terrible tragedy. It's a natural disaster, and we have to underscore that. There are many who don't resist any opportunity to take advantage of any disaster, natural or not. But this is a natural disaster that was not preventable. When you have utilities like MSD and the like, they plan for 100-year floods. They design for a 100-year event. There's no way you can plan for a 1,000-year event. It's just not only once in a lifetime, it's once in the existence of humans in Kentucky where this has happened. So, I mean, this is off the charts, even from the 1937 flood that was famously affecting Louisville, Kentucky back then. Mm-hmm. So there's no way you can design to prevent a 1,000-year flood because there's no way you can see it coming. So this is a natural disaster, and the only way you can respond to it is the way I think God hoped we would respond, in kind, supporting each other in need, being a good neighbor, celebrating and supporting governor. I'm so glad that Governor Beshear is in office now. He has proven that he indeed is a statesman and not just a politician. He has been through 3 major catastrophes in his administration. One, of course, being the COVID, first and foremost. And then, of course, the great storm in Western Kentucky. Now the flood in Eastern Kentucky. I mean, he has endured and managed to respond in a very sane and civil and compassionate way that has been unprecedented in recent years in the state of Kentucky and even nationally. So if you're going to have a disaster, it's good to have someone who is civil, sane, and sober and compassionate, leading us through the crisis that clearly Eastern Kentucky is in the midst of. Because if it affects one of us, it affects all of us. So this is our problem, our issue in the whole state, regardless of your political leaning. It affects us all. So it's a sad event, and you see how tragedy has no way, like the Bible says, it rains on the just and unjust alike. So we have no control of that. Just try to weather through it, be as good a neighbor as we can to get through it together.
Our son and his girlfriend just drove through that interstate that went, I don't know exactly how he went, but he said, Pikeville and Hazard. And if they had gone the day before, this was on Sunday, then they would have not been able to get off the interstate. I don't think they still could get off the interstate. I think the interstate was closed even before they went that way. But, I agree with you, Stan, about the climate issue, but I also think that geographically where we are in Kentucky, we're prone to different kinds of things other than hurricanes and intense fires like you see in California, other natural disasters that occur in other parts of the United States. I think the main thing is our reaction to it and how we respond to what has happened, and to get as much assistance to those people as we possibly can through temporary housing, to get the infrastructure back. I think they're working on all of that, but our response in what we can do, whether it's sending, actual articles or money or whatever it needs, I think that we have been touched either by Western Kentucky or by these floods to do a response that is worthy of who we are.
Absolutely.
That's right, and I think it's a call for, there are many kinds of religious faith and experiences that are going on here. the experience, unfortunately, of suffering, and then a consequent call for people to charity, and to reach out and to give care, it seems like that charity is going to happen, and it seems as if it's taken a time, of course, because this tragedy was a long one. So this wasn't, one of the things I noticed is that this wasn't just sort of a one-day event, but lasted over several days. And even as they were in the midst of doing, I don't know if you call it recovery, but reporting, they were saying, well, the rain is still coming. And so to me, that was touching to me, And so then the other thing is fear too. That's all a part of this experience. But then I think of charity and of care for our fellow Kentuckians is something that is paramount, and the needs there in the midst for those communities are just so great right now.
The motto for the state of Kentucky is "United we stand, divided we fall." Mm-hmm. And if you are familiar with the logo, it's a picture of a frontiersman who is dressed in buckskin and the like, shaking hands with someone who clearly is more of an urban person with a suit and the like. So it kind of demonstrates the need for the urban areas to work with the suburban areas and vice versa in the rural areas. It's kind of like, I think Charles Booker, he has a theme he's calling From the Hood to the Holler. That probably captures the spirit of that logo, United we stand, divided we fall, as much as any. And I think that much of the help that will come, that is needed for that area, will likely come from the cities and surrounding areas. So we're all in it together. It is indeed a situation where united we stand, divided we fall. If we all go down, if any go down, we all go down in some way. So I pray that it appears that it's bringing out the best in us and not the worst in us. Mm-hmm. That in tragedy, we oftentimes need to turn to each other, not on each other. And I think this appears to be an occasion to protest that we need to turn to each other, not on each other in a crisis.
All right, panel, we've got about 5 minutes left, and you mentioned Charles Booker. We mentioned Governor Andy Beshear. This will be the Fancy Farm Picnic number 142 coming up. The annual tradition features sparring and jabbing ahead of the November elections. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has decided not to attend. Republican Mitch McConnell and Democrat Senate candidate Charles Booker say they will be there. Panel, does the governor's decision to skip the Fancy Farm Picnic even surprise you?
It's understandable because the Fancy Farm Picnic, it's kind of ironic that it's at St. Jerome's Church in Western Kentucky in August, because I've never seen a Fancy Farm Picnic or watched it that there wasn't a great deal of heat, but sadly, precious little light in the discourse. And
I like that. Mm-hmm.
It's democracy in action, I guess, but I just have a hard time figuring out the theater.
Well, yes, Rabbi, you captured it perfectly in that poetic description. It appears to be an occasion for more heat and less light. Rarely do you get light from this occasion that I can recall. It's hot, of course. I guess it shows just how graphic you can get in your language. If you can grab a headline with a line that you might throw out there in this occasion, it's more theater. I don't blame, and I commend the governor for not attending, because he's in the midst of trying to solve this real problem for the state of Kentucky. So he doesn't have time to come down off this great wall of work to be involved with some mudslinging. He's trying to move mud in eastern Kentucky, trying to survive, save people who were the victims of mud, real mud in eastern Kentucky, to go down and sing some metaphorical or figurative mud in western Kentucky. So I commend him for that. So it is what it is, and so I don't condemn those that don't go and don't blame those that do decide to go. But please know what it really is and recognize it more theater than any substance.
I prefer to look at moral issues, moral analysis, even a moral analysis of political events. Here, to me, this seems to be more of a question that's political. But here's one thing I noticed in the news not too long ago. One thing noted about Kentucky is that there are now more registered Republicans than Democrats in the state. I've said the state, I think, culturally and politically has pretty much remained the same. It may have changed some, but now there's more Republicans. And it seems to me that Kentucky's followed a trend of the South of a Southern conservative Republican trend with the governance that we have, the politics that people choose. Given that fact, the Republican Party, I think, has a much larger place to play in the state. It does, just by numbers and the popularity, who's voted the supermajorities in legislature and things. Therefore, I think the stories are not going to be so much Republican to Democrat and the differences between the two. But the stories I think that we will see are Republicans differing with other Republicans, because they've become the large party. And naturally, I think that's what happens. And they are and probably will differ from each other philosophically now. And so I think that's where the conversations are going to be. That's where the differences are going to be. But the Democrat Party, I think, has gotten to be much smaller in that term, aside from the fact that we have a Democrat governor right now.
Sally, I'll let you have the last word on Fancy Farm Picnic. Will you watch or pay attention to it?
No, neither. I will not do it. I think there's enough mudslinging going on today that, sometimes you just have to back away from it and try and stay as positive as possible.
All right, panel, that'll bring to a close this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you for your input. Sally McClain, Clay Calloway, Stan Miles, and John Stoltz. And to our viewers and listeners, if you'd like to catch this program again or any episode, just go onto YouTube and you can search for Moral Side of the News and it'll be there. And Moral Side is now a podcast. Just search for Moral Side of the News wherever you get your podcast. Until next week, thank you, panel, and have a great week. We'll see you then. Moral Side of the News is now in its 70th year, making it one of America's longest-running public affairs programs. Thank you for making it part of your weekend. Thank you for making the 69th annual WHAS Crusade for Children a big success just a few months ago. There's still time to get involved. You can donate anytime. It's always Crusade season. Just send your check or donation to 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky 40202. That's 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky 40202. Or go online and make a secure donation at whascrusade.org and see all the many new ways you can make a donation to help change a child's life.